It's Wrestling. Dave Brown right along ringside, and we're ready to go. Another big day championship wrestling. I have my mic cords on down there. We're tugging away. Dave, let's get it on. Boy,
All right,
we got a big one.
Boy, I tell you we do. We're going to have Ric Flair here today on Championship Wrestling. Ric Flair scheduled to go against Rick McCord, and then we've got the Invaders scheduled against Dutch Mantell in another single match. That should be a good one. Then, expiration of time match today, tag team action. In this one, it'll be Sweet Brown Sugar teamed with Carl Fergie.
That's what it says.
That's
right there.
Brown
Sweet
Sugar,
Brown Sugar and
Carl Fergie against,
no,
I don't either, against Terry Taylor and Bobby Fulton. Should be some action there in that expiration of time match.
I guarantee you what, we're looking forward to all of it, as a matter of fact. And, of course, the momentous occasion that brings the NWA World Heavyweight Champ in here.
Absolutely.
Is that he is here to sign a contract for a title match. It'll be coming up in the future in the area, and we're looking forward to all of the festivities and everything else. So, why don't we get it underway, and we'll be back and ready to go with the opening bout and opening ceremonies for you in just one moment.
I hope you enjoyed that intro. That came from one of my favorite episodes of Memphis Wrestling. I've mentioned it here when Flair was against Lawler, and I thought I would never watch that episode again, but you can watch it millions and millions of times there on YouTube. This week, Shootin The Shiznit's been kind of on the shelf. My feelings are still raw about this, and can't explain why, even though I do say some things here in this episode that kind of explain it. But we lost Lance Russell on Tuesday. We had planned to have Scott Bowden on Shootin The Shiznit, was planning to interview him on Monday. And something got in the way with Scott's plans, so we just planned to get up early Tuesday morning. I was going to record the show, put it out, and had a few things we wanted to talk to with Scott. And so all of a sudden, I get up, and the first thing I see is that Lance passed away. I contacted Scott to see if he wanted to do the show. We both talked about Lance a little bit and agreed it just wasn't the right time. I got up yesterday morning, and we were going to record yesterday and to put it out. And still a really huge raw feeling there, something that I just didn't really want to talk about at this point. Now today, still not understanding fully why Lance Russell his death has affected me the way it has, but I did put together some clips here. I talked to Greg Anthony, Brian Thompson, a friend from a long time ago in the fanzine business of wrestling was Steve Beverly. He had a great piece on YouTube, and we actually reached out to him. I'm going to share that whole piece with you guys so that you can listen to him talk about Lance. There is also Lance Russell's nose, which I want everyone to hear. We're going to end the show, and I stole this off of YouTube with Lawler's thoughts on Lance. Hey, Lance, rest in peace. As you can tell, you were very loved. Guys, enjoy the show.
Yellow wrestling fans.
Hey, that's a good way to start this morning. I'm with my old buddy, always my old buddy, and actually used to be my co-host of Shootin The Shiznit until I kicked him off. Now, welcome everyone. Brian
He got fired.
Fired, as we say in the South. Welcome. We're going to do a few minutes here to go along with all the other stuff that I have put together here on this episode to talk about Lance Russell. And me and you spent a lot of time before this conversation through the years talking about Lance's style and what he did as an announcer. You being an announcer and did many wrestling shows, just tell us your thoughts on Lance Russell.
Oh, man, Lance Russell, one of the best of all time, and I certainly hope anybody out there that is not as familiar with his work will certainly take the opportunity to research and go back on YouTube or WWE Network or whatever format, High Spots Network, and watch Lance and just his delivery. And, he was a soundtrack to so many great moments, the empty arena match with Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk, or the Tupelo concession stand brawl, and just his delivery. And and one of the things I was thinking of as we were talking about, conversing about Lance and his passing was, you think about a lot of guys in the matches. I mean, a wrestler, an elder statesman, will put over a young up-and-coming star, and as they call it, pass the torch. Well, Lance Russell in his role certainly lit the torch of a lot of great talent and just helped guide them along the way, and just the way he helped the talent through a promo and made a guy look way better than he theoretically probably was. And so it was just his delivery. And I, subconsciously and just studying wrestling and, being a diehard, especially younger when I couldn't get enough of it, and watching the way he did interviews, I think I picked up things from there that I not necessarily know what I picked up, other than I knew that this guy was doing it the right way because it was enjoyable, and he was awesome. And I don't know that he will ever be nationally and worldwide appreciated to the level that he should be, or at least appreciated like those that grew up watching Memphis wrestling appreciate him. So one of the best ever.
I agree, and that was, the top four guys in Memphis wrestling to me. And you're going, Dundee, Lawler, and most people are going to think of Jimmy Bay, blah, blah, blah. But I think it was Dundee, Lawler, and third and fourth was easily Lance and Dave, because those were the guys. And I've said this before, but when he left to go to WCW, I just felt like there was a huge part of Memphis wrestling missing when he was gone, and that's why I think this death kind of touched me, left me kind of, feeling blah, because here's a guy, unlike the other announcers or other wrestlers that passed away recently, from the 1978 till whenever he left and came back and whatever. Lance was there every Saturday. I mean, I may have had friends that we got into it and I don't talk to anymore. I might have had arguments with my parents. I might have been nothing to do. But on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, I knew Lance Russell was going to be there, and I think that's part of it. Even though he hasn't been on TV for so long, it's just part of my childhood disappearing kind of thing. And it happens. It's going to happen no matter. The older we get, the more people are going to pass away, and our childhood won't exist. But the funny thing is that me and you had this conversation many years ago and talked about it, about him, and you kind of mentioned it, him actually grabbing somebody and being able to do an interview when that person doesn't even know that he is actually doing the interview for them. For instance, say it was Billy Travis, and Travis was really green, and so Travis starts, yeah, I'm excited, but Lance would go into it and say, well, you got a match Monday night. It was just a style that made the young guys look a lot better.
Well, he knew how to feed them and how to react to them, versus being, I hate to say, the cookie-cutter approach that we've seen in more modern times, where I'm here with my guest so-and-so. What do you think about your match tonight? And it just comes off so scripted. You felt like Lance was having a legitimate, real conversation with the talent. And so, if he's interviewing, wrestler whomever, Mr. X, and Mr. X is stumbling on his words, Lance is smart enough to say, I understand, I know you're excited, I know you're probably a little nervous, it's a huge match Monday night, and he was able to make the guy not look like a buffoon. And so to me, that's the talent that is gone by the fact that guys, maybe they do or don't know how to work like that anymore, or they're not even driven to do that. They're pretty much hit your lines, keep your mouth shut, and that's what we want. So Lance just had a style that was so realistic, and he could, you talked about the emotion and the Mount Rushmore, so to speak, of Memphis with Lawler, Dundee, Lance, and Dave Brown. Lance came into your living room every Saturday morning, and like you said, it was almost like an extended member of your family because, in the way he worked with both baby faces and heels. Baby faces, you're doing a good job, whatever, glad to see you on a winning streak or whatever the case may be. In the heels, you almost scold them, but you always knew even the heels respected Lance. They were just devious and evil or whatever, and so you didn't see anybody grab Lance Russell's microphone away from him. you didn't see anybody disrespect him. And nowadays announcers, especially in the major leagues, so to speak, are treated almost like buffoons and morons, and so then you're expected to take what they say about a talent seriously if you just berated them. But nobody did that to Lance. They treated as if Lance was the authority on that television program, and boy, were they bad when they disrespected Lance simply by doing bad things in the ring. And so they got a scolding from Father Time in a sense. So and you remember growing up with his grandmother, grandfather, or mother, father, whatever, the whole family, brother, sister, watching Lance. He was an extended part of your family, so that's why it hits differently. Even though you might have only met Lance once or twice or even never in your lifetime, you feel like a member of your family and a piece of your childhood is gone. But he lived a great life, and I'm glad to see him. He got to have some wonderful years with grandkids and such, and I guess great-grandkids and beyond. And so, for better than some guys that we've seen lost way too soon in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, I'm glad to see that Lance did get to live a full life.
Amen to that. And I tell you, I want to share. I have been reading the Jeff Walton biography. People may not even be familiar with the name Jeff Walton unless you're in the California area. Jeff was the manager known as Tux Newman on Memphis Wrestling. He had a whole section about Memphis Wrestling chapter there, and I'm going to try to bring him on here and talk about it. But when he first got into Memphis and Lance's style, he actually didn't like Lance because he felt like Lance was getting himself over more than the manager was able to get himself over. Jeff didn't actually understand what Lance was doing. And as he was in the area, he grew to love Lance Russell and what Lance was doing. It wasn't as if he was trying to get the characters over, and since everyone respected the main guy, the general, the one in charge, Lance Russell, who could call out, Mr. Coffee or Eddie Marlin or ever who he could, then he did grow to respect him. But that was a style that if it was the first time you watched him, you wondered what he was doing. It wasn't overabundant. It wasn't over for us in the sense that it was so that he was ahead of the talent, or he got over more than the talent, and he was trying to get them over. And when you understood that, and it's me, the thing about me is that every other announcer I've listened to, even though I do think there's been other good announcers, even Gordon Soley, I remember the first time hearing Gordon Soley and thinking to myself, man, he's just not Lance Russell. And that,
right.
That was always, when Jim Ross came along and was doing Mid-South, I become a huge Jim Ross fan. But to me, I still compared, there always was Lance who spent that time to get over, like you said, the baby and the heel. He was there to get both of those guys over. He knew his role and did a fantastic job doing it.
He was one of the best of all time, and like I said, I think it's a shame that he's not as revered nationally as he is in Memphis, and because he should be. And one little side note, my old broadcast partner from TCW days, cranky Chris Cruz. If you follow his Facebook, and sometimes you'll hear him spew some thoughts, and Chris is the best way to put it. But he spent some time working directly with Lance in WCW during that phase, I believe, from like 1989 to maybe 92, a 2 or 3 year span there, and so he worked with Lance on Worldwide and WCW Pro and different programs, and so. He got to see the man and learn about him. And Chris has been posting a lot of thoughts on Lance, and you can tell this one, kind of like you talked about with us, but probably obviously more so directly because they did work together. This one touched him, and he's sharing some great stories and just wondering why Lance was the type of man he was. And what I mean by that is he was just such a gentleman and kind-hearted soul. And Chris talks about a couple of times where it would have been real easy for Lance to blow a gasket over this or that. And one time, Cruz forgot where he parked the rental car in the days before you could click a clicker and turn it on and see where you were. And so they had to stay later. And just some good anecdotal stories about him. And just, Chris you see the respect he has, even old cranky Chris Cruz, and how much love and respect he had for Lance. Check it out if you don't have Cruz on your friend list. Find him, befriend him if he'll let you, and read those. So
that's what I'll make
Chris
sure I send.
Happy holidays, Chris.
That's what I was fixing to say. I'll make sure that Chris, both of us, you know him a little bit better than I do, but been knowing him for a long time. So he should enjoy the shout out. And by the way, Chris, have a good day. Please have a good day.
Yeah, there you
go. No matter what you do, have a good day.
Hey, coal in your stocking, Tramel.
Well, Brian, thank you for joining us. This is a somber episode. We had a few good laughs there, but I've got a bunch of other stuff we're all going to put together so the listeners can listen. You have a great day yourself, Brian Thompson. Thanks for joining us.
And most importantly, thank you, Lance. Rest in peace, sir. We'll see you next time.
Hey, we got Greg Anthony on the line here. We got a special episode today, as I explained, and we're just talking about Lance Russell. So, unfortunately, we lost Lance on Tuesday. Greg, I've said a lot before you came on, so I'm just going to let you talk. You tell me what Lance Russell meant to you and what Lance Russell meant to our area, the Memphis area there.
I mean, Lance is, was widely considered one of the greatest wrestling commentators of all time. And I think that really comes from the simple fact that he lent believability to what he was doing. I mean, he was a newsman, you know what I mean? And here was this newsman that was a commentator for professional wrestling. I mean, he was a trusted figure within the community. And, when he spoke, people listened, So when he said that, Jerry Lawler, was the king of Memphis, people believed it. When he said that, at the time that, that Bill Dundee was, this dastardly bad guy that, would do anything underhanded to get a win, we believed it. He was so vital to, in my opinion, to the success of Memphis wrestling. Lawler, Dundee, Jimmy Hart, and Lance Russell. That's huge components to one of the hottest territories of all time. I actually, I posted the picture on my Facebook of meeting Lance at CAC in Vegas. What I didn't tell him then is I actually met him about 30 years before that, because he did some work at the Mid-South Coliseum with the NWA, and I went to see an NWA show at the Coliseum back in the late 80s when I was like 7 years old. And he actually signed, I've actually got it in my wrestling room somewhere, he actually signed my program, Lance Russell, on the card with, had Flair and Sting versus Muda and the Steiners and things like that. So, I mean, just from a personal standpoint, too, as much as he meant to wrestling in general, he meant a lot to me because, I've had that autograph for all these years. I thought it was the coolest thing ever,
Yeah, I mean, I just got off we'll air a part I talked with Brian Thompson before this and just repeated that I mean, there's been some of the guys for me that's passed away, but it just seemed like this hit me harder. He was part of just a major part of my childhood, and always being there, even though someone else might not be. On Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock, we had Lance Russell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like Jerry Lawler is, in his 60s, and he's still able to go all over the country and be a huge draw for professional wrestling. And a lot of that is for the simple fact that he's been on television with WWE for 20 plus years. He was a fixture of that company. Same thing with Lance. I mean, a lot of, I didn't move here till I was 6 years old, and that was the late 80s. And even though, you grew up with Lance, every Saturday morning, I didn't grow up with Lance like that. But in the same instance, that voice and the way he presented everybody in reality like that was a huge part of just professional wrestling in general.
Agree 100%, Greg. I want to thank you for coming on. We'll see you down the road on Who Wants to Be the Best Shiznitter Ever. Have a great day, Greg.
You too. Appreciate you.
You know, one thing the Fabs and the Rock and Roll Express have in common, when they go and do one of their specials, they have to go and plunk down $2 to buy a record so they can put it on their little turntable so they can do it. But not Jimmy Hart. Why? Because when I do a special, which you're fixing to see right now, a little surprise for you, Lance Russell, I hope you enjoy it, then I don't have to do it because I write, I produce, I do it all, man. I play guitar, bass, I sing it, and it's probably going to be the #1 hit in the world today. It's the greatest song I've ever written, and I want you to roll it right now. I know you're going to love this, Lance Russell. I know you're going to love this, Russell. Come on.
Artist on the horizon, actually not a new artist. A lot of people calling, the phones are lighting up this morning for the new record from Jimmy Hart. It's called Lance Russell's Nose.
I was listening to my radio late last night when I heard a knock on my door. I went to the window and I peeked outside. It was a girl about 5'4". She said she saw my name on a bathroom wall, so she thought she'd give me a try. So I locked the door and I invited her in. But when I turned on the light, she had Lance Russell's nose. She had Lance Russell's nose. Little rocky smile that drives me wild, and Lance Russell's nose. She had Brooke Shields' hair. You should have been there. Boy, was I surprised. Oh, Gary Hill and Mick Jagger lips and Michael Jackson's eyes. Dolly Parton's chest. You know that's the best. And old Herschel Walker's thighs. I was doing all right till she turned on the light. It was then I realized she had Lance Russell's nose. She had Lance Russell's nose. Little rocky smile that drives me wild, and Lance Russell's nose. Did everybody want you? Did everybody want you? Did everybody want you? She had Lance Russell's nose. She had Lance Russell's nose. With a rocky smile that drives me wild, and Lance Russell's nose. She had Lance Russell's nose. She had Lance Russell's nose. With a rocky smile that drives me wild, and Lance Russell's nose. #1, Russell! #1!
Well, I tell you, if it is, it'll be the first one you've had around. At least you got, being a little more of a gentleman than you are, it saves me from saying what I would like to do with those records and earphones. We'll take time out and be back in just a
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Beverly. There are many of you who are watching this out of a specific interest that I haven't spoken with in some time and haven't seen because I haven't really been part of this genre for the better part of going on 20 years. But I'm stepping out in this instance because of a very special gentleman that we just lost. To say that Lance Russell was everyone's friend is really an understatement. But for those of you who came just within inches of a touch of him and had the opportunity to watch his work and then saw him at an arena, at an event, in a public venue, you know that Lance treated you as if you were the most important person in any room rather than he. I remember what Lance told me many, many years ago when I first met him. He said, "You know, you have an ability, and I've seen what you do." And I said, "You've seen what I do?" He said, "Yeah, I've had an opportunity to take a look at some of the stuff that you do." And he said, "You have a real ability to just look at the camera and treat it like it's one person that you're having a friendly conversation with. And he said, that's what I've always tried to teach the people who have worked with me, is that you can't take the camera and think that it's 18, 20, 100,000, a million people out there. You've just got to think about that you're talking to one person. And Lance, if you think about the kind of lessons that he taught broadcasters like me, because he was one of the masters, you felt like you were getting a textbook education in one conversation. He was that kind of guy. The first time I did meet him face to face, we'd talked on the phone many times, was in Nashville. And I'll never forget, it was at a shopping mall. And I remember the wrestler Lex Luger was they were asking him to come forward and have some interaction with the audience. They were trying to build up for a show that they were doing in Nashville the next day. And Lex looked at Lance and he said, "What's my motivation?" And Lance said, "Your motivation is to get those people so excited that they'll go buy a ticket tomorrow and go watch you wrestle." Lance had a way of just cutting right through the mustard and being able to just not overcomplicate the story. If you ever called him on the telephone, you know exactly what it would sound like. He would pick it up, and instead of hello, it was always yellow, and that was Lance again. He introduced so many broadcasters to television, not just in the field of professional wrestling, but he did so in other areas that a lot of you are not familiar with. And one of the key things that he did before his good friend and longtime colleague Dave Brown moved from radio to television was to give Dave a specific piece of advice. I'm going to take you back to an appearance that Dave Brown made on our Jackson 24/7 newscast a little more than 2 years ago. And this is what Dave said about the key piece of advice that Lance gave him.
Well, pro wrestling was the first television job I had. I was a rock and roll DJ, WHBQ Radio in Memphis, which was one of the top radio stations in the nation at the time. And Lance Russell, who incidentally began his wrestling career right here in Jackson, was the program manager and also the host of the wrestling show. He came in one day while I was on radio and he said, "Dave, the guy who's helping me do the wrestling show is leaving. I would like you to co-host with me." He said, "I don't know how you feel about wrestling. I don't know if you like it, don't like it, or indifferent to it, but if you ever think you want to be on television, you should take this job, because you will find out if you like television, and you'll find out if television likes you." Because he said a lot of people would like to be on television, but for one reason or another it just doesn't work. So I thought about it a little bit, and I took the job, and I didn't really care for wrestling. I didn't hate it. I didn't really care for wrestling that much, though. I just took it for the television experience. Well, 35 years later, I couldn't wait to get to the studio and find out what we were going to do next, because it became great entertainment and great fun. Lance and I were together for 25 years and 35 years for me total. There's a special thing coming up in Jackson toward the end of October, a month from today, as a matter of fact. It's going to be October 24th, and Lance is going to be here to be honored by the wrestling people, and I'm going to be joining him, so I'm looking forward to that.
And in most cities, if you are a meteorologist or on a newscast, you wouldn't be allowed to do wrestling on TV. So why do you think it worked out for you?
I was grandfathered in. That's all there is to it. It would not work today. The way the broadcasting industry is, it would not work. But for some reason, there are a couple of things. For one, I was always the voice of reason. The guys would come out and they would mess around with Lance and all of that. With me, I was kind of the liaison with the television station. Say, wait a minute, got to put a lid on this. So I was kind of wearing the coat and tie, the straight and narrow. And I think people accepted that role. And for some reason, it was okay with them that I hosted the wrestling show on Saturday and then gave them the weather Monday through Friday. One key to that, though, I think, is because I took the weather very seriously. I tried not to take myself seriously in either case, but I took the weather very seriously and tried to give people the most accurate weather information that I could possibly give them. Somehow it just worked. It would not work today.
Lance was the kind of person that saying that, it was just classic Lance to say to somebody, you need to take this job to find out not just if you like television, but whether television likes you. And it was probably the best and simplest way of expressing it, because there are some people who might think they should be in television, but for whatever reason, they don't connect with the viewers because they don't know how to have that magic that Lance did, where he treated the camera as if it was one person and that you at home were his best friend. Not many people master that to the degree that he did. Dave Brown told me many, many times that he owed everything in broadcasting, not just the fact that he became a well-known and well-liked wrestling commentator, but that he had an opportunity to become a weathercaster and ultimately a meteorologist for WMC-TV, Channel 5 in Memphis. Dave retired a couple of years ago, and the one good thing that Lance also taught Dave, and Dave said this is one thing that he really felt like was another lesson that he learned, was that when the day comes that you get ready to retire, make sure that you do a good transition and that it's in good hands. And that's exactly what Dave did when he passed the baton to Ron Childers, who had worked with him for so many years at Channel 5. We know year after year how we enjoyed Lance Russell when he would sit at that desk. It was almost like a news desk of wrestling on Saturday morning. And he would, when Jimmy Hart would start his shenanigans, he'd say, "All right, Jimmy, you come out here and you do all these things." And most all of us could do a very half-hearted imitation of Lance doing that, because it was the kind of thing in that era that made Lance who he was. Lance was part of that era where the host of a wrestling show could challenge the villains before it became so packaged and the interviews became so teleprompter dominated, and before really the skits became so rehearsed. It really was the kind of thing that Lance could just work without a script. He could be that person that was the devil's advocate against that villain that was coming out, and he could make you believe that there was more tension out there on the set than anyone. That's why he was who he was and why people loved him all through the Mid-South. He took the jump because it was a six-figure salary for him to go to Turner Broadcasting and to do its wrestling shows. Many people have asked me over the years, why did Lance not succeed at Turner? I won't say that Lance didn't succeed. There were too many people in the executive suites at Turner who would not let him succeed. Why? Because they had a specific pattern, a specific format that they wanted their wrestling shows to follow. And they didn't let Lance be Lance. Those of you who were in that era and remember it, you know, Lance tried his best to make something out of the syndicated shows, but they simply would not let Lance be Lance. You wouldn't see him coming out there on a set and challenging Ric Flair or Ole Anderson like he did all of the bad guys in Memphis. It just wasn't meant to be. And so Dave Brown and I had a conversation about that not too long ago, and we said, you know, it was a case of Lance had the ability, and he was 62 years old, but he was hardly old by any stretch of the imagination. But the bottom line to it is, Lance had to be Lance to succeed, and that was just not something Turner would allow in the constraints of its format. I'll tell you one more story. Lance was made in charge of the 900 hotline, what was called the wrestling hotline on WCW. And he was a programmer. A lot of people don't know that Lance started out as a program director in television. He was in radio for a long time. He was right here in Jackson, Tennessee. He was a radio broadcaster for baseball. He did minor league baseball here in this community. But he was program director of WHBQ-TV in Memphis, Tennessee. And so he had the skills to understand what programming meant. And he saw that you had situations where they were trying to promote their stars having an individual day on that hotline. And he'd even told me the numbers. He said 40% of the time, these guys don't even update their lines for 2, 3, and 4 weeks. So in a very gutsy move, Lance went to Jim Hurd and the people who ran the wrestling hotline, and he said, we need to do some things differently. So he took a big chance on me to do a radio phone version of Matt Watch, my newsletter that I did for 4 years. It was a very tough decision. Some people that read the newsletter didn't like that I did it. I did it primarily because I said, as long as you allow me to be me and to have the freedom to be me, I'm not going to shill for your shows. I'm not going to promote cards. I said, I'm going to do an audio version of Matt Watch, or I don't want to do it at all. And Lance said, that's exactly what we want you to do. And so I was loyal and did it week after week after week. And for 2.5 years, I was on that hotline until finally you got some people that were in the executive suite that just decided that I was no longer needed and decided it was time for me to go, which was fine. It was an interesting time in those 2.5 years. But in short, I'm going to tell you something. Lance Russell was loyal to a T. It was his idea to bring me to that hotline, and he stood behind me almost from the get-go. And you all know it. There were elements in WCW that were just horrified that he would get a, quote, sheet writer to come in and do something like this on their hotline. Well, the numbers were successful. They were making money off of, even after what they paid me, they were making money off of those Tuesdays on the hotline. Lance had the numbers to back it up, and it was a business. And so even though the old wrestling people didn't care for it that much, I stayed with it until, as we say, until Lance was no longer a part of it, and you had other executives who decided they wanted me to do things a certain way that I just couldn't do because I wasn't going to be one of their shills. So, in short, it showed me once again that Lance Russell was a man's man. He was the kind of individual that if he believed in you, he backed you, and he was a huge believer in young people, trust me. He just really believed that this was a world that young people had to be given their opportunities. He was willing to share his wisdom and to share of his experiences, but he believed it was a new generation that had to be able to have their opportunities. He certainly gave me one, but he was also very encouraging of me when I became a college professor, when I finally left daily television and became a broadcast journalism professor at Union University, a place he was very familiar with. And he was very encouraging. He said, I predict that you're going to be very successful with this because you've got the fire and the belly for it. And he said, when you're teaching young people, you have to show them an enthusiasm, particularly in an area such as television and overall broadcasting. I never forgot those things from Lance. Many of you know that also, probably about 16 years ago, Lance had really difficult heart surgery, and we thought we might lose him at that point. And it was a case of, well, was he going to continue to maintain what he was doing in the wrestling business at that point in time? And I talked to his late wife, Audrey, at that point in time, who was a dear lady, and I said, you tell Lance that he doesn't owe anybody a thing, and if his doctors tell him that it's time to hang up certain things, he's given us enough memories, and we'd rather have him around a lot longer. I'll say this in closing. Lance Russell gave us many Saturdays across this country as well as just in the Mid-South. Lance gave us many Saturdays where we had extraordinary entertainment, and I can tell you it wouldn't have been nearly so had he not been the catalyst and the traffic cop to make it all happen. He gave us a personality that reached out to other people, and when you saw him in person, he'd extend that hand and he'd look at you, and you felt like you were the most important person there. But most of all, Lance Russell, as I said, was a man's man. He loved his family. He loved his children. He was living with his children, one of his sons, in Florida at the time of his death. And I got a call from him about probably 9 months ago. I was working out at a local gym not far from here, and it was an unmistakable voice. I picked up my phone, and I'm like this, and he says, "Is this the inimitable Steve Beverly?" And I know I can't do Lance very well, but yes, I said, I know exactly who this is. I said, inimitable is not the case, but yes, it is me. And we had a wonderful conversation. I stopped my workout. You stopped anything if you were going to talk to Lance. For 45 minutes, I stopped my workout, and we just had the best conversation. When I got the word earlier today that he had passed away at the age of 91, it just left an empty feeling in me because a couple of days earlier I'd found out that another great broadcaster who I'd had the privilege of being a friend for the last 17 years, Monty Hall, had passed away. Lance Russell, I considered for what he did, he was an equivalent of Monty Hall because he did everything he did to the best of his ability. He did it for the audience, and he also had a way of looking right into that camera and making you feel he was talking directly to you, not a big throng that had been gathered. I said earlier today that for Lance Russell, you taught us all. And indeed he did, particularly those of us who were broadcasters who learned so much from him just by watching him and by hearing his stories. I already miss him, and I know most of you do as well.
You know, a lot of times when a loved one or a great close friend passes away, you are left with the feeling that I never really got to say goodbye, or I never really got to tell the person how I felt about them. But I'm happy in the fact that over the years, I did have several opportunities to tell Lance how much I thought of him, how much I loved him, how important he was to me, that without Lance, there would be no me. And I knew that, and I had the opportunity to say that to Lance Russell. I loved Lance Russell, and there'll never be another person like him.
I just wanted to tell you how much fun it is coming back again to talk to you, even with a little nonsense. Hope you enjoy this particular day, wherever you may be.
I'll tell you for a fact, and we got more of it coming up next week, though, my friend, so we're going to be looking for you.
We'll see you the next time we're around, where they've got ring post and that kind of stuff.
Till we see you at that time, for Dave Brown, Lance Russell saying bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.